Welcome to Coast Vue, the show that every single day celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi, and Mississippi for that matter, such a great place to live, work, and play. I've got a couple of quotes I want to share with you at the beginning of the show today that really apply to the conversation we're about to have. The first one is from Vince Lombardi. Everybody knows who Vince Lombardi is. He was a famous head coach, as we know now. And here's what he said. The price of success is hard work, dedication to the job at hand, and the determination that whether we win or lose, we have applied the best of ourselves to the task at hand. I talk a lot about success and failure and learning from failures and willingness to take risks. And we can never be perfect, that's for sure, but we can have an image of perfection, and we can strive for that and define that in sort of successful terms. We talk a lot about that here on Coast Vue, whether it's your personal life, your business life, or the work you do in the community. I think it's really important to understand how important hard work is to the overall conversation. Here's another one from Steve Jobs. I'm a big Steve Jobs fan. I've read everything that's been written about him, his book, and studied his life in great detail. What a transformational leader Steve Jobs was. But here's what he said. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. Gosh, I love that one. And, if you think about entrepreneurship in Mississippi and the conversations we have about creating an entrepreneurial sort of ecosystem in Mississippi, the really awesome conversations I have with Eric Hill from the Center for Entrepreneurship at Mississippi State and others. There's a lot to learn from entrepreneurs, and you may not truly appreciate what I'm about to say, but my friend Gerard Gibert, who hosts Middays with Gerard weekdays here on SuperTalk from 10 to 1, is someone who understands everything I just said and more. And he followed his intuition and had tremendous success. And I can't wait to tell his story, but also share each other's story about how we landed in these darn chairs. It's kind of an amazing moment. So anyway, without any further ado, let me welcome my friend Gerard Gibert to Coast Vue. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, Ricky. Thanks for having me.
So listen, I talk about this all the time. I had over 800 conversations here on Coast Vue, and I've learned so much, man. The opportunity, when you're running a business, man, you don't really have time to sit and focus on individuals for a long period of time and to prepare for the conversations you have with them. But it's been a gift connecting to people. Do you often ask yourself, how in the world did you find yourself in that chair, given what your past was?
I do. And so often it's like, am I really doing this? This is kind of surreal. I think about what my daily routine was for so long and what it is now, and just what the contrast there between running a business with my hair on fire all the time, which you're well aware of, and then doing this job. It's completely different, but not in a negative way. It's just different.
Yeah. Okay. So look, let's we're going to kind of take a step back here in just a second and sort of retrace your steps. And as I mentioned, at one point in your career as an entrepreneur, it really mirrored my career. And we'll compare some notes as it relates to that. But technology controlled a lot of our ascension in our lives. And we'll come back to that. But how did you find yourself in that seat? Tell me that story.
Yeah. So when I got out of school at Ole Miss with a major in accounting, I majored in accounting because I guess I have somewhat of a inclination to be good at that kind of work. But the traditional path is to go into the public accounting world and practice public accounting. And back then, the goal was to get hired by one of the big 8 accounting firms, now 4. But, around I guess, the middle of my senior year, I said, I really don't see myself doing that as a career. I don't think I would enjoy that. And I got some exposure, as we all do in B school, though not a great deal, but to the world of computers. And, I had figured out I'm pretty good at this and I enjoy this. I think I have more fun with that. And the firm Arthur Andersen would actually hire folks directly into their consulting division, which focused on large-scale systems design, development, implementation. And they would hire people right out of school to do that, and you didn't have to have a computer science degree. In fact, they generally didn't hire folks from that academic background. They just wanted people that had a desire to do that kind of work, that they felt had good personalities, could interact with people well, and just had a good aptitude. And I had talked to someone that had just graduated the prior year that went down that path and persuaded me to do the same, got into that. And while I was there, the PC was introduced, the IBM personal computer. And you could just see that was taking the world by storm. It was just incredible how that was changing. These things were popping up around our office there at Arthur Andersen. And, I started getting an entrepreneurial itch. I wanted to go home. I was traveling around the country, which is, you just accept that when you work for a firm like that. They're going to assign you wherever they need you, and that's just part of the job. And I saw an ad in Byte magazine one day, BYTE, which was one of the journals for personal computers. And it was mainly focused on developers, more technical types. And there was an ad in there for MicroH, a franchise that was selling franchises and building out their network across the country to entrepreneurs who wanted to sell personal computers and bring that to the market locally. And I responded to that and said, gee, I'm interested. Problem is, I didn't have any money. I had a lot of giddy up, but I didn't have any capital. And that's how I got interested. It was really from a Byte magazine ad where they were soliciting franchisees, and I called them up. And the Computerland network was building out, and it kind of dominated that space at the time. But you could tell they were more focused on non-business sort of applications, but still kind of catering to hobbyists or just pushing boxes, as we used to call it, to corporations, but not really solutions. And MicroH attracted me because they were more focused on software and accounting software and business software, vertical software, which was my background from working at Andersen. And so, that's how it all came about. The problem is I didn't have any money and spent a long time trying to raise money and got told no over and over. 16 months, honestly, I got told no. So. Well,
listen, what's interesting about early in your career, you think about what your degree was in, your time in the consulting business. You began to really build. So if you think about sort of the business situation, you've got the technology that enables whatever the business might be. Then you have the business processes that are engaged in that. You've got the people that are engaged in that. In some cases, there's a sales aspect to that. Your personality, your background, your sort of natural leadership abilities, and the fact that you understood that the application side of this was going to be the key to success. You were hitting on a lot of cylinders, really. I was trying to figure out, actually, from reading your bio, how old were you when you started kind of pursuing the vision around MicroH?
Yeah, when I started pursuing it, I was 27.
Yeah.
When I finally secured financing, I was 28. And when we opened in 1986, and something that might be of interest to the Coast audience is that after having the door shut on me by numerous financial institutions and potential investors that just couldn't see where this was going, couldn't appreciate it, and basically told no. And I didn't realize at the time, the way I do today, if you don't have any collateral, if you don't have any security, you're not getting any financing. And I was looking for $189,000. My business plan that I had cobbled out on a compact luggable at my parents' kitchen table at the time, I had cobbled out. It had shown that I needed $189,000, which was not a whole lot of cushion, but enough to get going. and nobody would loan me that. And I was ready to hang it up. And honestly, at that point, felt like I was going to have to move out of state to get the sort of work that I was capable of doing, that there really wasn't any work in the state to do that. And my sweet wife came to me one night, and she had been, of course, I'd been keeping her up with the progress, which wasn't a lot at the time. And she had been sharing that with her parents. Now, Julie, my wife's from Biloxi, her parents from Holly Street in Biloxi.
Hey, let's do this. We're going to pick it up. We're going to pick it up at Holly Street here in just a second, because my wife's from Biloxi too. So we'll share those notes as well. Hey, when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Gerard Gibert. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to Coast Vue. I have my friend Gerard Gibert from Midday SuperTalk from 10 to 1 every break. He was telling us about, he had seen an ad in Bite Magazine,
yeah.
and for Micro Age. He wanted to do a franchise. For a year and a half, he tried to raise the money. The thing you didn't mention, during that period of time, it was really hard to get capital without any collateral. Very difficult. You learned that hard lesson, didn't you?
I mean, it still is. As you know, what was I think a little different during that time period, Ricky, is those that were around then recall, we had just come off the savings and loan crisis. And so the Resolution Trust Corporation was moving in to take over various failed S&L institutions, including some here in Mississippi. And so banks were already very squeamish about loaning money. I've told people, if you had a $100,000 piece of property, you couldn't get a $50,000 loan on it, even for real estate back then. It was just really, really tight. And so it wasn't very good timing to go to the market. And I admit I was 27, as I said. And at 27, first of all, you feel like you're infallible. You know everything. And I'm going to walk in these banks and pitch them on my idea and my capital needs, and they'll just stroke me a check. And of course, one of them gave me the corporate party line. If you want $189,000, you need to have a $189,000 CD in the bank. Well, heck, I wouldn't be here if I had that. Another said, Gerard, I think people have all the computers they're ever going to need. And that was 1986.
Mm-hmm.
So, I got that line, and just, you're too young. You just need to go back to the, public accounting world, even though I couldn't make them understand. I work for an accounting firm. I'm in the consulting division. I don't do audit and tax returns. So it was a lot of frustration, and I was ready to hang it up. And my wife from Biloxi had been sharing my progress with her parents. My father-in-law sold vehicles at D Chevrolet there in Biloxi, and my mother-in-law was the chief accountant at Keesler Air Force Base. They were a very modest means, old Biloxi family, met in World War II like so many couples of that era did, and happened to make a good decision when they first got married and bought some land out north of where I-10 is, around the Wool Market exit, 19 acres. And it didn't cost anything back then. Paid on that for years and years. Felt like that'd be a good long-term asset to hold to retirement. And my sweet wife came to me one night and said, well, as I understand it, she doesn't know anything about banking and finance. You need something that you can give to the bank so that they'll give you this money. I said, yeah, that's called collateral security. Something, an asset that they can perfect. And she said, well, my parents have 19 acres north of I-10, and I-10 was a wilderness, so to speak, back then. It wasn't what it is today. It wasn't the town and the area hadn't moved that far north at that point. And she said that they're willing to actually make that available to you if that would help. And I said, well, of course that would help. I guess so, just frustrated at the time. And I foolishly accepted that offer because that was their life savings. And so I took that deed and I went back to one of the banks and I put that on the table and I said, will this do? And their eyes got really big and they knew at that point they had to proceed and make this loan. And so I took out a 7-year loan, a typical 7-year term loan. and we paid that off in 5 with every extra dime we got. My partner and I kept our salaries very low. In fact, we took a cut in pay when we left our jobs, and we kept it at that level until we paid off that debt so that we could return that deed to my in-laws. And I got to tell you, that was a happy day. And this is one thing, both of my in-laws have since passed away. This is one thing I regret. Of course, I thank them as often and as much as I could for their generosity, without whom we wouldn't have been able to make a go of it. But the one thing I get now, Ricky, and I know you will appreciate this, you're indebted to somebody. They typically want to know how you're doing, right? They want to make sure you've got certainly in the commercial institutional world, yeah, you've got all kinds of reporting requirements to show that you're capable of servicing that debt. That's just part of the agreements. And during that time period, never, not once, did my in-laws ever say, "Hey, Gerard, how's it going? Can I see some financial statements?" Not one time in that 5-year period. And it didn't hit me then the way it has since I've been to Wall Street and raised money and had to comply and adhere with all of those reporting requirements. And after thinking through that, I'd like to think it's because they trusted me. And I think surely they did. But the bigger thing is they trusted their daughter. They trusted their daughter's choice in husbands. And I think that's really what caused them not to ever ask me, "Hey, how's it going?" I mean, I can't even comprehend that. I'm holding their life savings, and they've never asked me how it's going. I look back on that. I regret that I never shared with them before they passed away just how special and important and wise on their part that was. I regret that, and I hope they in heaven know how I feel about that and how appreciative I am. And they may have been smart enough to know, if we ask that, that might make it even tougher, put more pressure and put us more at risk. Maybe that, I don't know what they were thinking, honestly, but
what's fascinating to me though about your journey, Gerard, if you think back when you went into your consulting world, the advent of the PC starts. Of course, that once that came out, things were sort of on moving at light speed at that point. Then you start microage in the late 1980s. You get into the 1990s, and then we start to see data center technology, cloud technologies begin to really start to evolve, certainly by the mid-1990s. And what happened is you started microage, you mastered that aspect of it, but then because of this application side of you, this business-minded side of you, you began to form a lot of connections between what you've learned in microage and what you are able to do to help businesses. And that evolved pretty darn rapidly, really rapidly, over just a few years. And suddenly you realized that what you're doing and where you could go with your business was way beyond your micro-age world. Tell a little bit about that.
Yes, it's a great point. So to operate a business like that, which is nothing but constant disruption and constant change and reacting to that change. And people used to ask me all the time, "Gerard, how do you keep up with all that technology?" And I would always respond, "I got to tell you, that's easy. I hire an army of people to do that. They're really smart. They do that. What keeps me up at night," and you alluded to it a bit, is the way in which it is delivered and consumed. That's the change that keeps me up. It's like, where do we fit in this very complex, ever-changing ecosystem? And so it was from our early days of, really pioneering networks back then, which were not nearly the sophisticated networks we have today. There was no such thing as hubs and switches in the early 80s and even into the 90s. That was all a new thing, and routers and wide area connectivity. That all was not even available at the time. So the build out of the internet certainly changed things, and that kind of launched the e-commerce ecosystem prior to cloud, which really came about in the 2000s. When we saw that, there's a different way to deliver and consume this, and we were concerned that trying to live off this one-time project type, go out and hunt for the food every month business was just, it was going to kill us, honestly. And we came up with this idea of launching a data center, one of the first commercial data centers in the country, and the first by far in Mississippi, and that was 2001. And we were delivering cloud services before the term was invented. The term didn't come along until a few years later. Back then, we called it Application Service Provisioning, ASP. You may remember that acronym. And that's what we sold was, and we had this service we called Freedom, the Venture Freedom service. And then we didn't call it cloud services. We call it Venture Freedom ASP. And we built everything around that. And you may find this interesting is Auditor Phil Bryant was the keynote speaker when we launched the data center in the Jackson State University East Center. Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann was my corporate lawyer at the time and was also the corporate lawyer for the Jackson State University Foundation. He brokered the deal that landed my data center in the JSU East Center, which was built by the Allstate Corporation in the 70s. And the first African-American Supreme Court Justice, Reuben Anderson, was on the board of Allstate. And he's the one that told his law partner, Delbert Hosemann, go to Allstate and get them to donate this building to JSU. And Reuben said, Delbert, you're crazy. They're not going to give that to them.
And man, the rest is kind of history after that. Hey, when we come back after the break, there were some really interesting times prior to developing the data center in 2001 where Gerard was on the road a lot and he was learning about life and how to pull this off and how to find success in the trenches. We'll talk about that in just a second with Gerard Gibert. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to Coast Vue. Middays with Gerard Gibert. It's weekdays from 10 to 1. This is a conversation I've been really looking forward to having for quite a while, I might add, quite a while, because embedded in it is sort of we share journeys through business that landed us in these chairs and radio. We never expected to be sitting here. I can assure you that. We share a lot, actually. I was mentioning prior to going to the break, prior to the 2001 timeframe for Gerard's sort of, entrepreneurial story when he opened the first data center in Mississippi. He was on the road a lot. So as microage sort of evolved, he began to get into some pretty complex applications. And so he was commuting to places like Trenton, New Jersey, for example. And about the same time, actually, I was commuting to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and to Miami for about a 2.5-year period. And, weekly from Biloxi, involved in some projects for Knight Ridder, the company that owned the Sun Herald. And we were re-engineering the company. We were deploying new technologies. A lot of the technologies, in fact, Oracle, for example, and Sun Microsystems, the kind of stuff that he was working with in Trenton. And but when you're in the trenches of these massive application projects like you were, that's the best place to learn about life, isn't it? I mean, that's how you succeed as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, this was a $40 million project that it's kind of an unusual story. At the time that the state was going through this procurement process, which, by the way, was the third iteration. This was a Y2K project for the New Jersey Department of Corrections. There are 16 institutions in New Jersey, and each one of them were operating their independent premise-based IBM System 36 and some old legacy software that was not Y2K compliant. And they were under the gun and running out of time to get this done, and they failed twice at getting a contract done through an RFP process, and all the giant consulting companies had responded, of course. And we got involved through another partner we had, a document imaging partner. We were actually one of the first FileNet partners, if you remember that particular very sophisticated document imaging workflow software. And FileNet was a part of this project, and they knew this thing was having a hard time getting a prime contractor. I had an employee that decided to, without talking to me, agree that we would prime this without my knowledge. And I was a little absent at the time from the company because my father was terminally ill and I was attending to him. And I literally found out that we won this project the day my dad died. And this employee came to me and said, "Well, we won." I said, "We won what?" And she started explaining it to me. I had no idea. And I could tell this was a major ordeal. It's a $40 million project for the Department of Corrections. And they had a quite the extensive contingency plan that that proposed that the National Guard would come in and take control of these 16 institutions and these 50,000 inmates in these institutions if we couldn't get the system up and running in time. Just a little pressure. And the state, being pretty nervous about that, called upon the Gartner Group, which is one of the most prestigious IT consulting organizations on the planet, not far from them in New York, come in and essentially assess the project, the success of it, and the ability to complete it in time. They came back and said, "You need 66 months." And so the folks at Department of Corrections said, "Gerard, what are you going to do about that?" I said, "Well, I can't change what Gartner Group says. We're just going to keep working and get this thing done." And so that required me to commute. I had 7 subcontractors that took care of various pieces and components of the project, very sophisticated Oracle applications, and I commuted every week for 31 months and then worked on the weekends when I was back home as well to get this thing done. It was incredibly stressful. I also learned that we were upside down on the project by a few $1 million, and I had to go negotiate with the state treasurer of the state of New Jersey to help us out. And I went to her, Ricky, and said, "Madam Treasurer, I can still see it today, sitting across from her desk." I said, "I'm just going to be honest. I had an employee that didn't really take care of this the way they should have, and I'm upside down, and I'm going to go bankrupt. And I just need to let you know I got to go home and get my affairs together. My company's bankrupt." And she leaned over that desk, Ricky, and said, "Please, Mr. Gibert, do not leave. Got to remember the time frame. You couldn't just pick the phone up and call somebody and say, 'Hey, we got this $40 million Y2K project. We need an army of Oracle developers and network engineers and Sun engineers to come in here and sweep this thing up.'" There were no one available to do that. So she knew that, and she said, "Mr. Gibert, do you trust me?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I do." And she said, "I'll take care of this. Please just go back to work." And so for the next 6 months, I didn't hear anything, wondering, am I going to be made whole here? Are they going to take care of me? And I wasn't looking to make the kind of money I should have made. I was just looking not to go bankrupt. And she took care of it. And we went ahead and completed the project in time. Obviously, I probably wouldn't be alive today if we had not, but we completed it. So we got that 66-month project done, according to the Gartner Group, in 31 months. And it was written up in the various journals for the corrections industries, the most advanced system in North America.
Gerard, what's interesting to me about that story, though, if you just look at it just from a pure entrepreneurial point of view, the dogged determination that was required, the whole notion of like biting off more than you can chew, and learning what it feels like, what it really feels like to have to live with ambiguity, have to be courageous. Because when you looked in the mirrors before you went to work in the morning, you were wondering, how in the world are we going to pull this off? I mean, how are we going to do this? And you just find a way. I mean, I often use the word dogged determination, but that's really what it takes. Because when you're there in front of those people who are relying on you to pull that system off, they don't want to see you sweat. They want to see somebody who's in control of the situation, who can get it done. And there was a lot of body language reading going on between you and her. And she obviously trusted you. You had to trust her. But what that did to sort of unleash your mind and the capabilities of your company, and it just continued to advance your company, ultimately leading to the start of the the data center in 2001. You go back and look at the time frame of that. When you did that, that was a courageous move in and of itself.
It was a huge risk. It was a huge risk. And I remember, as I was sharing earlier, it was Lieutenant Governor Hosemann at the time was just a lawyer and my corporate lawyer. He was also the lawyer for the JSU Foundation. And JSU wanted that building. They wanted to make it a high-tech center. It's the JSU East Center, and they wanted a data center. Delbert calls me and says, Gerard, I understand you got a data center. I had just launched a little 200 square foot, 4-rack facility where we were kind of experimenting with a new business line. This may be something, so to speak. And Delbert called me and says, I understand you got one of those. I don't know what that is, but JSU wants one in their building. I need you to move it over there. Okay, Delbert, how much square feet do they want me to take? He said 13,000. And then I went like silent, like 13,000. I just have 200 square feet in 4 racks. You know how expensive it is to build a 13,000 square foot data center? Now, that's nothing compared to today's modern data center.
Right, sure.
Back then, that was a big deal, especially for a small business like mine. And so I came up with an idea. I said, let me sleep on it. I came up with an idea, and I presented it to Delbert. I said, if we can get JSU to subscribe to services that we would deliver, things they need from that data center that would just cover my rent, I'll do it. And we worked that out. And that's how I ended up in the JSU East Center with the data center. Still going today. And Ricky, I play golf every now and then with former Supreme Court Justice Reuben Anderson, who most people may not know is really the person who drove the Civil Rights Museum. He's the one that got the Civil Rights Museum.
Right.
He's the one that did it. And every time I'd see Reuben, he'd always say, Gerard, how's it going for you? Is it going okay out there? Yes, sir, it's going fine. I said, don't you ever move that place. You hear me? I said, yes, sir, I got it. But no, it ended up being a win-win deal. And, the rest is history. The facility has experienced, and I checked on this last week, about 5 hours of downtime, total downtime, 5 hours. That includes Katrina, when the whole Tri-County area was dark. All of our systems worked like a champ. We never stopped computing, even during Katrina. And it's something we're really proud of. 5 hours. So we've achieved not the vaunted 99.999%, the 5 nines, but 99.9997. We're pretty proud of that. The way we engineered that is quite the feat. Right here in Mississippi, there are 55,000 end user company customers still being serviced by that facility.
What's amazing, and again, that I cut my teeth on the operations and IT side of the business. The amount of redundancy in systems, if you think about sort of power redundancy, if you lose power, you got to have generation power. This is not an easy feat. And if you think about it, there's this one aerial photo, a satellite photo of Mississippi after Hurricane Katrina, and virtually the entire state of Mississippi was dark. And boy, you better have some really good redundant systems in place, or you're going to be in serious trouble. That's a hell of a story.
Yeah.
Hey, when we come back, we'll talk about the expansion strategy, the selling of venture, and then how did he land in this role? We'll see you after this. I'm enjoying my conversation with Gerard Gibert from Middays here on SuperTalk, and it occurs to me that we probably could have gone through maybe a series of shows to tell this incredible story. But it is a story that really prepares him well for sitting in that seat to do Middays, because he understands politics and entrepreneurship and business, and you grow, you get more wise going through the kind of experiences that he went through. And you got an opportunity now sitting in that chair, Gerard, to share those experiences and make it make sense to people. And I'm excited about that. Hey, listen, in 2007, between 2001 and 2007, you're growing, you're adding, eventually you get into this huge growth strategy that involves gobbling up other companies. Your board of directors starts to shift and change as a result of that. And ultimately, the board of directors chose a direction, I guess something you really didn't want, to sell the company. You wanted to go in a different direction. But, that's sort of the way of the world when you start developing a company that grows and then you sort of lose control to a board of directors. That's the way it is. But how do you talk about that?
Yeah, so I first should probably share that the idea came from the fact that our industry had gotten mature, and we had a lot of folks just like me that had built these great businesses, and they just were all hunkered down saying, I don't really want to put any more capital at risk. I'm comfortable, have a lifestyle, but I got to figure something out. And so it was a very fragmented industry. I went to Wall Street in 2007 and pitched the idea, put a business plan together to grow my company, serve as a platform, acquire other companies to grow strategically. And at that time, Ricky, Wall Street said, your company's worth nothing, by the way, and we don't like your strategy. But I met one person that said, I like your company. I like your management team. I like your vision. Let's do some things, come back and see if we can go back to the financial community. We did that, went back in 13, pitched again, got term sheets. They were like, couldn't write enough checks then. They finally gotten what I was trying to tell them 5 years earlier. Yeah, you guys are going to do pretty good here. So in 2014, we closed the first transaction. That combined 3 companies. We bought 2 more. We did all that with what's called cash flow debt. So we preserved our equity in doing so. The downside of that is you have to issue board seats to the sellers who are now equity owners of the platform, and it's one person, one vote. So it was in 2018 that we had gotten pretty good. We had quadrupled the EBITDA organically. The strategy worked. It was successful. These guys saw that and said, I think we can fetch a pretty big penny in the market. And so we then I had to go out and sell an asset I didn't want to sell. I was the chief salesperson. And that process went on about 16 months, and we ultimately closed the transaction in January of 2019, all cash deal to a larger version of my company that was frankly following the exact same strategy we were.
So how old were you when you sold the company?
I'm 60.
60. Okay, and I was about 56, 57 when I finally decided to retire. When did you start sitting in at SuperTalk? Where did that relationship come about?
Yeah, so I've known the SuperTalk owner, founder, Steve Davenport, for a long, long time. I ran into him in a restaurant one night. This is when the great J.T. Williamson had been ill and unable to fulfill his duties as host of the show. And that was in the 2020 time frame, I believe. I have to think back through that. I get lost on the years. But I ran into him in a restaurant, and he said, you've always been a good guest. I've been a guest on JT's show, on Gallo, many times, talking business, technology, politics. Why don't you see if you would be interested in hosting, guest hosting? I did. One day went to 2 went to 3, and then it became full-time. In the 21 time frame. Of course, JT passed away, as you know, last year in 22, and then Labor Day of 22, the show became Middays with Gerard, and so roughly 2 years now I've been doing it full time.
You're probably doing the same thing I'm doing, which is every day you learn a little bit more. Every day you grasp more clearly this vision that Steve had to create this SuperTalk Network, 12 stations. He owns 26 stations, and then he has a network that goes even beyond that. Yeah. But I came from media, and I always wondered about radio, where they hold in their own in this digital age, and I was really impressed. While most radio companies were consolidating and taking away sort of the local voice, Steve was doubling down on the local voice. And what it means for the power of SuperTalk is pretty significant. And, what kind of evolution is going through your head about how significant that strategy is and the role that you play in having these important conversations about Mississippi?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Okay.
How many people I've encountered, and I know you run into the same, just across the state, doing the remotes at events and so forth, that say, I rely on you for all my news. And it puts a little pressure on you, honestly. I never really thought about myself as being the purveyor of information and, the information hub, if you will. And then it really hit me that folks seem to be, in this state at least, they're more tuned in to what's going on in the state and locally, and they want to hear that from state and local personalities. And they're so turned off with the national news and the national media. They just want to focus on local and state. And we blend local and state information with national information on the show, as you're well aware. So that it's hit me. Yeah, people do listen a lot.
Well, we're at the end of our time together, but what's interesting is that there is so much noise on the national level. We really can make a difference locally and across the state as we have these conversations that are important. The thing that impresses me most about you is the amount of time you put into your homework. You're really focused on making sure you understand these issues. I did that as well as a publisher. I do that even more so today. And it's been fun to sort of go on that journey with you, my friend. And I appreciate you spending some time with me.
Enjoyed it. Thank you, Ricky. Thanks for having me.
It has been an absolute pleasure. This has been Gerard Gibert, and have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.